For this lesson, let's learn about how to solve a linear proportion. If you have a fraction on your left and another fraction on your right and put equal in between, that's a proportion. The kind of proportions that we will discuss in this video are just linear proportion. In other words, the highest exponents in our equation is just 1. So how do we solve a linear proportion? Well, it's easy. Just follow these steps. Remember, we need to follow the steps in order, but you can skip a step if it's not applicable to the problem. Alright, let's look at our first example. The first step in solving a proportion, this proportion that we're going to solve, is doing the cross multiplication. That's the first step. So in your cross multiplication, you're going to multiply this pair and then another pair. Okay, let's begin with the pair that contains a variable. So you have x and 3. You multiply them. 3 times x, that gives you a 3x. And then 9 times 7, which is 63. That's step number 1, cross multiplication. And then the expression that you will come up, you just need to apply the steps in solving linear equations in one variable. So step number 1, if you still remember from the previous lesson, step number 1 is doing parentheses, but we don't have parentheses, so skip number 1, then do step number 2. The variable should be on the left and the constant on the right. Then we have satisfied step number 3. Then we proceed to the last step. We focus on the left. We undo this multiplication by doing the division, divide both sides by 3, and now we simplify them. This is x. 63 divided by 3 is equal to 21. So our x is equal to 21. All right, now let's do our second example. So we have this proportion and we will solve for the value of x. Now again, step number 1 in solving proportion is doing the cross multiplication. So this will be your first partner. All right, and this will be your second pair. Now you just need to multiply them per pair. So each pair has x, so we just need to do we can start anywhere. So let's start with this. So I'm going to have x plus 2 in parentheses and then multiply it to the positive 2. I close them in parentheses and that tells me that this is multiplication. Okay, and then I'll put equals the other pair. So I can start with 3 in parentheses and then x minus 8 in parentheses. All right, that's step number 1, cross multiplication. Then step number 2 is applying the 3 steps in solving linear equations. So wherein the first step is doing the distribution to remove the parentheses. So as you can see, both sides has parentheses, so we have to do the distribution. So let's focus on here first. So we do distribute this part here. So remember, for distribution, we do multiplication. So 2 and x is 2x. And then 2 times 2 is positive 4. Then equals. So for this side, we have removed the parentheses. The next is on the other side, we also need to distribute this part. So the first pair will be 3x. 3 times x is 3x. And then 3 times negative 8 is negative 24. When you put this in your calculator, you should have 3 times a negative 8. That's step 1, remove the parentheses. Next step in solving linear equations is to gather the variables in the left side. So my 2x is already in the left, so I'll just bring it down. Another x is, but it's on the other side, so if I move it to the left side, it should change the sign. So from positive, it will become a negative here. All right, so all my x's are in the left. Now I have to move all the constant to the right. My negative 24 is already in the right side, so I'll just bring it down. But then my positive 24, I need to move it to the other side to join with negative 24. That's positive, so it turns into a negative here. All right, and then I'll simplify. After moving things, I'll just simplify per side. So here, if you put this in your calculator, just don't put the x. Just put in your calculator 2 minus 3. And that gives you a negative 1x, or just negative x. Okay, don't forget there's an x. Is equal to, put this in your calculator, negative 24 minus 4. That's negative 28. So that's step number 2. Now we do the last step. We focus on the left side. Remember, there is a -1 number here, and we need to remove it. So because the number there is -1, I'll divide this by -1. I have to do it to both sides. All right. So this negative will be crossed out. So I have x equals -28 divided by -1 is +28. So the answer is +28.